I never thought I'd have to say this out loud, but the current state of independent music distribution is not okay. I mean, have you looked online lately? It kind of hurts to talk about, honestly, because for years and years, music distribution and the role I played in it was something I was extremely proud of. Indie distribution seemed like a rare bright spot in a very messy, complicated, and compromised music industry. And no, the ability for unsigned musicians to release some music to the world, it didn't level the playing field as was promised, but it really did open up massive amounts of opportunities that had been closed to those types of artists for really the whole history of recorded music up till that point. The opportunities to reach a massive audience, to monetize that connection, it had really been mostly reserved for notable artists, prestige artists, artists on big labels, artists with connections. Indie music distribution disrupted that stranglehold. And for more than a decade, it really did facilitate a whole new economy of working musicians, independent musicians, who could have full-time careers and big audiences without having to jump through all the same hoops and play all the same games that artists used to in the 20th century. But it seems that times have changed. The shine has worn off, and what was once a solution for indie musicians has grown into a whole new set of problems. The system is now failing the very people, the clients, the artists, the customers, the humans that it was built to serve. So lots of music marketing gurus are going to tell you to release music more often. But very few of them are telling you what will happen when distribution platforms mess up those releases, which unfortunately is happening a whole lot these days. So today, we're going to talk about the horror stories, how the industry got here, and 4 ways to protect yourself and your music from the minefield that is the modern music distribution landscape. Plus a bit of a mindset shift that every artist should have before, during, and after a new release. It's the ugly truth about music distribution. Let's get into it. What's up? And welcome to Scratch Track. My name's Chris Robley. Scratch Track is brought to you today and every day by Demo, the place to be if you're a busy musician who has lots of adult responsibilities in your life, and although you have limitless passion for your music, you have limited time each day to put into things like music promotion and building your audience. So you got to make those minutes count. Demo is the place where we're working on strategies to help you do just that without having to chase trends or go broke or burn out. So music distribution, it's that thing you need whenever you have a new song or a new album to put out. You want it to be on Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon Music and YouTube Music and all the places. You upload it to one convenient location and they take care of the rest, right? They handle all the metadata. They send it out through the digital pipes to all the good places, right? Right? If you're lucky. Unfortunately, more and more artists these days seem to be unlucky when it comes time to release new music. In fact, if you took the names of the top 12 or 15 independent music distributors, and you wrote them on a piece of paper and you stuck it on the wall and you taped it there, and then you took a dart and just threw it at that piece of paper, chances are pretty good that no matter what name it lands on, if you look it up online, if you go on Reddit, if you go on their own social profiles and look at the comments of their social posts, if you look at YouTube, if you look at the content that a lot of musicians make themselves about their own release process, if you look on customer satisfaction sites like Trustpilot, or if you go on music management forums on Discord or within Facebook groups, you're going to see complaints, an overwhelming volume of complaints. Today, of course, I'll tell you what many of those common complaints are, what you can do about it. But first, I just want to say a couple more personal things. One is, I have a lot to get off my chest in this regard. I worked in music distribution for more than 18 years, or at least in aspects of the industry that overlapped with distribution fairly closely. And I had initially intended to launch this podcast with this sort of episode, addressing the truth of music distribution. But I didn't, because I was afraid that in having so much to get off my chest, it would just be a very negative way to launch a podcast that I ultimately hope is about empowering grown-up musicians to still do good things with their music despite all the challenges they face. So I held it back. But now that I've got about 10 episodes under my belt, let's go there. And part of the impetus for me to do this is that you may have seen a video by an artist named Venus Theory going around on YouTube a week or two ago. It's gotten, I think, hundreds of thousands of views at this point, lots of commentary building up around it. And it is an in-depth analysis, a really well-done analysis of all of the problems with this industry. It's about 45 minutes long. You know, he does all the typical gimmicks of a great YouTube video. And I thought, holy crap, I'm jealous of this guy for making this video. Until the end of the video when he says, it took me 3 months straight to create this thing. I haven't slept in weeks. And then I thought, okay, there's no way I'm going to spend that much time on this topic. But it did a great job of distilling a lot of the artist frustration that's out there. Then I saw last week on the channel Musformation, Jesse Cannon do a similar video talking about lots of the problems, lots of the frustration. And at the end of his video, he actually gives 3 kind of concrete recommendations for which services to choose. And in a sort of up-to-the-minute context, that's very helpful. But my recommendations in this video are going to be a little more conceptual. And I think I can address this problem from a different angle, which will also be helpful. So I wanted to make this now while the topic and the controversy is kind of raw and on everyone's mind. One other quick disclaimer before we dive in. My lawyer, who is completely imaginary and lives in my mind and is drunk right now, wants me to tell you that although I have more than 18 years of experience in this industry, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Pretty much everything I'm about to say is hearsay and rumor and conjecture, a fever dream, outright satire, or a hallucination. This video is entirely for the purposes of entertainment. It's fiction. Nothing should be taken as fact, advice, actionable intel, or journalism. So treat this all as useless, and please, enjoy your bad decisions. All right, well, if they're all so bad, you might be saying, Chris, I'm really just here because I need to put out some music soon and I want to know what to do. Well, if that's you, if you're in a hurry, if you don't have 7,000 hours to sit around and listen to me rant and ramble and get shit off my chest about distributors, well, you are in luck because I have a guide called The Music Release Checklist that your distributor hopes you'll never read. I'll put the link in the show notes, grab that. It'll help you prepare no matter which of the crappy distributors you choose. So check that out. With that out of the way, let's get back to the complaining. All right, so you threw the dart at the wall, it landed on a name, you looked up that name, and you saw mountains of complaints. Well, what are those complaints? What the hell is going wrong? Shouldn't they just take your music and deliver it from point A to point B or point A to point Z? Just has to travel through those digital wires, right? Not so fast. Here are the most common complaints about music distribution today. First, botched metadata issues. Metadata is just the information you put in about your music. It could be who wrote the songs, who the publishers are, the ISRC codes, the UPC codes, the genre, the song title, the featured artist, multiple primary artists. And if you get it wrong, which is kind of easy to do, it's a lot of stuff, it can be kind of complicated, or if they get it wrong after you've entered it in, which can also happen, guess what happens? Nothing. Your music often goes nowhere. It doesn't get sent out. It sits there in a queue of unaddressed, uninspected releases. Well, that's fine. Wouldn't you think you could just hop right back in there and fix it? No, you can't. A lot of times you can't make the changes yourself within the distributor's dashboard. And if you want them to fix it, well, we'll get to that in a second. Number 2, music getting pulled down from streaming platforms. And most prominently, you will hear about it getting pulled from Spotify. Why did this happen? Might be your fault. Might be their fault, might be Spotify's fault, might be a fraudster's fault, but good luck getting an answer. 3, some fraudster out there putting a fake Beyonce track on your profile. Seriously? Yeah, this happens. What about mismatched music catalogs? That's when, by either some completely random mistake or because perhaps you share a similar artist name to someone else out there, your music ends up on their profile or their music ends up on your profile. Now that can be really fun if you're a metal artist and they're a folk artist, but it doesn't stay fun for long. How about hidden fees? Now, this is not a universal problem to distributors. Some are very transparent. Others look like they're being transparent and simple in their pricing. And then when you get in there and you start getting all these upsells and charges for things that you think you want because you're excited about this music, you want it to go to the most places and have the most opportunity, right? So of course you check all the boxes. Now something that you thought was going to cost you $20 a year, if you end up putting out like 6 singles and an album each year, you could be looking at a price tag of more than $1,000. Speaking of add-ons, what about predatory upsells? And confusing products. Like, I just wanted to get my music on Spotify and now they're saying I need this other thing. Do I? I guess I should do it, but didn't they used to give me that for free and now they're charging for it? And could I just do it myself if I just had an extra 5 minutes? But they're using all this language like it really matters. So I guess I'll just believe them and pay them. And then when you do and you realize you're not getting the value you paid for, now you feel cheated. You go on Reddit and you complain. I mentioned the confusing issue of like a fake Beyonce song ending up on your profile. There's also a similar confusing issue where someone will pretend to be you and make music that they put on your profile as you that you had jack shit to do with. How about false content ID claims? This is where someone samples your music or they use the same sample or pre-canned beat or licensed beat that you did in your music, but then they just tamper with the release date so it looks like their version is the earliest occurrence of that sample. Now they get to collect all the YouTube ad revenue associated with that sound, all because they lied and the distributors did nothing to catch it or correct it. How about mountains of just unmanageable AI slop music? What kind of service do you think that they can provide to you when those digital pipes are absolutely clogged with shit, with very little effective attempt to slow it down, catch it, or stop it? What about the ability or the inability to claim your YouTube official artist channel? I've seen ticket requests that are 6 months, 12 months, 18 months old on this one issue with no resolution. And it's something the distributor says they facilitate for you. So why are you stuck in limbo? Sure, some of that might be YouTube's fault, but maybe the distributor shouldn't offer it to you then. What about the wrong audio snippet going up on TikTok? What about your music not appearing in Instagram's music catalog at all with no explanation? Oh, and if you get an explanation, a lot of times it's insulting. Pretty damn condescending to you and your music. And sort of simplest and saddest of all, I think, is just you missed your release date. Could be for any number of these reasons. Maybe it's a metadata reason. Maybe you put in Mozart for the publisher instead of public domain, but you couldn't fix it. Couldn't fix it yourself. They weren't going to fix it. And now this thing that was supposed to be out last Friday is still stuck in hell, even though you signed it up for distribution 2 months ago. Plenty of time in advance, right? But you're fucked and they don't care. It's unacceptable. These services, these advocates, these champions of independent music, these companies that get it, that are by artists for artists, that are easy and only 20 bucks a year, that are gonna unlock and power up and boost you, that are supposed to be the platform from which you launch your music career, or at least your music. They're collapsing, they don't work, they took your money, thank you very much, and now, if it please you, just fuck off, because if you actually need us past that point, you're costing us money. And it's time and money we can't afford to lose for lots of reasons that I'll actually get into later. Now, I want to be clear, I'm, of course, talking with a bit of attitude here. I'm not trying to say this as a slight against the people who work at these places. They're often very, very good people who are passionate about music. They're often trying their best. And I know because I was one of them. 20 years ago this month, I stepped through the doors of CD Baby for my first day on the job. I'd been working at a bank job at Bank of America that was one of those jobs. I took it because I could leave it. I didn't care about it. And I wanted to be able to tour and gig whenever I wanted. And if I lost my job because I became undependable, well, it wasn't one I cared about. But it worked. I stuck it through. I was there for about 3 years, in which I got to know the vice president of CD Baby at the time because he'd come in to cash his check. Every time he did, I would beg him for a job. And I knew about CD Baby because my band, when it came time to sell our CD online, well, there's this service called CD Baby that happened to be right down the street in Portland, Oregon, where I lived. And so I went there one day, I dropped off my CDs, I signed up as a client. I saw this crazy, amazing, like Willy Wonka warehouse of music and these people zooming through the warehouse on scooters. And it just felt like a magical, super thriving, creative, anarchical environment. I think this was like post-dot-com bubble, but this was one of the companies that made it through, and there was still all this optimism and enthusiasm about what the internet could do for musicians. I fell in love with it immediately, begged this guy for 3 years for a job, and one day he said, "Hey, I think something opened up. Why don't you come in for an interview?" It was a customer service job. I came in and I did the strangest interview I'd ever done in my life. I walked in, I sat down in front of this sort of panel of 3 people, and they said, "Hey, see in the corner of the room there, that's Derek, the founder of CD Baby. That's his guitar. Can you play Smoke on the Water?" So thankfully I could. I picked it up. I played Smoke on the Water, or, the first, 20 seconds of it or something like that. And they just said, "Cool. Do you think you'd like working here?" And to be fair to them, I think they already knew they were going to hire me because, again, the VP sort of already knew me and we'd conversed a lot about music. They knew I was an active musician in town. So I got the job. And thus began a kind of accidental 18-year career in music distribution. Through that journey, I did a lot of things. I ended up being on the editorial team where we would review lots of the music that came in. We'd pick the best stuff, or, the best stuff according to our own ears and tastes, to position for extra placement on places like Pandora and Rhapsody and Napster and those sorts of places. Then I joined as one of the original members of the marketing team. Throughout all of this, I was writing and managing their forums. Kevin Bruner and I started the DIY Musician podcast, which grew into the DIY Musician blog, which I edited for quite a long time. We then launched the DIY Musician conference, which happened around the world, 8 or 9 times, something like that. It was a blast. I wore a lot of hats at that company. And in the years after Derek sold the company, I became one of the 2 most, recognizable public faces of the company. But what I really want to talk about today, and what I feel like is most pertinent to this discussion, is the first job I had there, which was simply customer service, answering the phone, answering the emails, calling people back when they left a voicemail. there was a team of maybe 12 of us where we'd come in the morning and there'd be maybe 30 or 40 voice messages from both artists and customers, because at that time we were also a CD store. Actually, we were primarily a CD store. These were the days just prior to digital distribution, where everyone's focus kind of shifted to MP3s and selling music on iTunes. When I first started, it was basically an online direct-to-fan CD sales fulfillment solution. And that meant we had two distinct kinds of clients. There was the artist client and then the customer purchasing the CD. We'd have to call these people back. We'd have 1,000 emails a day that we had to work our way through. And all the while throughout the day, calls were incoming. And we did it. We didn't do it by spending 30 seconds on a call and rushing the person off so we can get to the next call. We didn't do it by having some macro or form copy and paste answer or ticketing system where you can just do the bare minimum to deflect until another day. We did it by answering the goddamn question. And if it took us 2 hours to do it, we stayed on the phone. If, for instance, the question was, hey, I shipped you guys my last CDs, but I need my UPC code. Well, we're sitting on the answer. It's 500 yards away in our warehouse. Let me get on a scooter, go right over there, take the CD off the shelf, bring it back to the phone, read it to you on the phone. And then once you've got your answer, you don't need to call back. We've helped you. Goodbye. Thank you. Now I got to travel those same 500 yards to 3 warehouses away and put the CD away. But as I said, the benefit of doing that, of taking all that time, of treating you, the customer, the artist, like a human being who deserves an answer because you paid us, was again, that you didn't need to call us back again. You were happy. Your problem was solved. There could be any number of reasons why people would call or email us. Some artists were just confused about what to write in their bio, which they needed to do if they wanted to sell on our store. And you would guide people through what to say, what kinds of information they should pull, how they could do some soul searching, find the most interesting things to say. And to avoid any kind of timeout issues in the dashboard, we usually recommended people write it outside, like in a digital sticky note or a Word doc or something like that, and then paste it in. One guy had no idea how to cut and paste. And while you might think that that takes 30 seconds to teach someone, when they're terrified of technology, you stay on the phone with them for 10 minutes and you guide them through it. And when he saw that miraculous moment when a bunch of paragraphs he'd written elsewhere magically appeared in the dashboard, he started screaming in joy and surprise. He asked me what my favorite candy was. I said Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And like a week or two later, I get this giant box full of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Reese's Pieces, Reese's the breakfast cereal. Like, the dude was so psyched that I helped him solve his problem. He sent me food. People would do this all the time. They sent us chocolate. They sent us freeze-dried squids. Things would get weird and wacky and wonderful because the connection was human. The average outcome was that if you contacted us, you felt our respect for you, not just because you paid us as a client, but because you were a person doing something that most people in the world never do, which is to be bold enough to create something and then to try to share it with the world, with all the hope and fear that comes with that. Now, this was a weird time in the industry because CD Baby was really like the first mover in independent music distribution. We were like the only choice in a way because companies like The Orchard, which were more like a label, they curated their catalog. You'd have to apply. They were very selective and had a small roster of clients compared to us. We were the only game in town, and that meant in a way that we could afford to be that hands-on and empathetic with our clients because everyone was coming to us. So while we had to handle the volume, it came with the benefits of being basically the only company that earned money in this space. Now, eventually that changes, right? New competitors come in. At some point, Tunecore started up. It was a little bit terrifying to suddenly have a competitor, but in a way it was also exhilarating. It's like, oh, their model is similar enough to us that we know how to compete. And now you're locked into a fight that actually improves your services because then you have to double down on what makes you the best. And again, that was our humanity, our reachability, our dependability. A few years after that, Distrokid arrived. And I think for the first time we were existentially scared. You know, I don't think we necessarily saw it this way at the time, but in hindsight, I can see what happens is when you are the incumbent, when you are the dominant player, the prestige player in an industry, you get big, you get powerful, right? And this is like, if you're the White Star Line, you build the Titanic, right? It's a massive ship. It's a luxury liner. It's comfortable. It goes fast. You're out there in the ocean and, oh God, there's an iceberg that you actually see. You see it, but you're so big and you're traveling too fast. You can't turn quite as nimbly as you need to in time. And you start taking on water. You know, business people have a lot of ways of maybe describing this. It's like tech debt or labor force bloat or something like that. It's just like the thing that makes you powerful becomes your liability. Your strength becomes your weakness. So there we in Tunecore were out there on the high seas, traveling too fast and too big, and we don't move away from the iceberg in time. We start taking on water, and Distrokid arrives nimbly, quickly. They are a faceless app in a world of cool new apps. They don't want to be a human-to-human connector. They want to be a data point to outlet connector. They want to function like a slick, quick tech company. And that's great. They did what they did very well. They attracted, hundreds of thousands or millions of artists to them because they could do what they do quickly as long as you don't need help. Again, this is conjecture. I have no particular insight into their, founding strategy or anything like that. I just saw the distinction between CD Baby and Distrokid as if you need help, CD Baby. If you want cheap and fast and you're comfortable online and you never need help and you never get stuck, Distrokid was the obvious solution. And if you need hand-holding, well, they don't really want you because you're costing them money, right? And for a few years, that gave them a major leg up because their sticker price was dirt cheap. Of course, they have all these massive upsells like I alluded to in the beginning of this video. But before you know that, the sticker price is cheap. So lots of people choose that. And as the competitors to Distrokid start losing market share to them, start losing clients to them, or prospective clients to them, as the Berklee College of Music textbooks, which only used to mention CD Baby, and then CD Baby and Tunecore, really started to lean on Distrokid first, well, then we have a problem. And while one solution might have been to triple down on the humanity and the hand-holding, the reachability, unfortunately, it went in the other direction. It went towards automation, chatbots, canned responses, de-emphasizing human connection in favor of quick responses. Now, from my perspective, having worked for years in customer service, then moving to other departments, I was kind of horrified at this because the metric I would have used to measure success in support is not response time. It's not how many responses you, the individual support staff person, did that day. It's nothing like that. What it is how quickly can you get to the final contact? Because if it takes you 10 seconds to respond, that's great. But what if that artist has to write you back 12 more times, which I'm not exaggerating, happens all the time now because the response the artist gets is inadequate. It doesn't treat them like an individual. It takes no proactive interest in their problem and in their music. It doesn't think empathetically. It doesn't think. The response, what is this response? It's not even human. A human being should take a proactive, empathetic, curious stance when they're reading your fucking email or your call or your chat or whatever the hell it is, your ticket, and say, how would I want to be treated? Like, actually, you shouldn't even have to put yourself in this person's shoes. Like, just be a normal human and fulfill your obligation to answer the question. And though I'm kind of fuming about the state of CD Baby support, this happened everywhere. Every single music distributor support sucks. And it sucks because the pressure became gut support staff behave like a robot, deflect, 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 deflect. Unfortunately, that means the mountain of unanswered tickets, or more importantly, unresolved problems that humans are experiencing continues to grow because the insufficient answer you gave them in 10 seconds, well, it didn't solve their problem, so they have to write you back. And then your response doesn't solve that, so they have to write you back, and they write you back, and they write you back. How is this helping anything? The only metric I think that matters is how quickly can I answer your problem definitively so we never hear back from you, making the final contact as quick as possible. And if that takes me 2 hours on the phone with you, if that takes, instead of a cut and paste answer, me typing out by hand 6 paragraphs or 70 paragraphs, I don't give a shit. Solve the fucking problem. But everything became about scalability. Oh, can we scale support? No, you can't. You can't scale support like that if what you're trying to do is attract more and more customers while eroding the quality of your responses. Now, does that mean that Distrokid, in inventing themselves as a faceless, no support kind of quick app solution to music distribution, does that mean that they were poised to stay on top forever? No, because the solution they provided by being quick and faceless created problems for them. So unfortunately, as I said, the CD Babies and the Tunecores of the world, where they could have tripled down on the reachability and the humanity, they tried to kind of do a half-ass version of getting towards what Distrokid was, eroding its brand reputation, disappointing customers, providing inadequate service. Now, for a time, that gives Distrokid an increased advantage because they're still seen as the hip, coolest, dominant player now. However, the ease and the facelessness and the quickness of their distribution which was its comparative strength, now became its weakness, because that meant everyone in the world was starting to use them. Good players and bad players. The fraudsters. The person who wants to release 10,000 tracks about cat poop. The ones who borrow beats. The ones who aren't ones. They're ones and zeros, by which I mean AI music. If you become the easy, quick, and faceless solution to get music out into the world, you are going to handle and disseminate problematic catalogs and invite a lot of scrutiny, not just industry scrutiny or customer scrutiny, legal scrutiny, political scrutiny. Now your advantage is your liability. Your strength is your weakness. New solutions to old problems just make new problems. If you look at the distribution landscape today and you wonder, well, who's replacing Distrokid as the leader in the space? I would say there's a fracturing of attention, there's a fracturing of brand trust, and that means there's a whole lot of little players now, which seem to be taking a much more curatorial stance. They're acting more like labels or label service companies. They don't want to deal with everyone. They certainly don't want to deal with AI. And in doing so, perhaps the problem they're creating is that distribution itself is going to become harder and harder to acquire or to qualify for. If there become more obstacles to good distribution, more hurdles, more applications, more criteria, well, they'll be cutting themselves off from a percentage of long tail revenue, which means they have to have a small stable of high earners. And who knows, are there enough of those types of artists to go around between 20 or 30 distribution companies, especially because they probably just get scooped up by a label at that point? Maybe the problem with that scenario is with small rosters of medium earners that can't keep the lights on and the price of distribution goes up again. It's just a guess. I have no idea. I'm just trying to reiterate how new solutions, new opportunities come with new challenges. And that brings me to another thing that happened to distribution over the last 10 years. The way in which Spotify streams skewed industry incentives so grotesquely that it created a whole new slew of problems. When Spotify came to the US, I think it was around 2012 or something like that, it was pretty exciting. Long last, you would have a sanctioned way to have all the music ever recorded right there, one service in your pocket. You know, minus like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and whoever else didn't want to join the party right away. And with Spotify came this amazing ecosystem of open playlisting. Any user could make a mixtape, essentially, of their favorite tracks and share them with all their friends. Now, inevitably, some people have better taste than others, and that meant that curators, tastemakers, grew up in this ecosystem, and people leaned on them to be a kind of discovery engine that was powered by Spotify, but not driven by Spotify. Of course, Spotify had its own official editorial playlist as well, but really the power was that you could reach these independent tastemakers, pitch your song, and if they liked it, they put it on their playlist, and that could lead to actual streams and actual new fans. And I know today there is so much frustration around Spotify and playlisting and bot streams and stuff like that. But back then it was kind of revolutionary, and it made actual real careers happen for people who are not household names. It was a whole new way of people making a living and finding an audience without having to have a big budget or really any budget. It was awesome. It was pretty awesome. Unfortunately, as every single artist in the world and every label started to focus on this as the way to break new artists, it started to drive bad behavior. You could have unscrupulous playlist curators who charged for placements. You could have unscrupulous promoters who'd take your money and then pitch your music to either lots of sketchy playlists or playlists that just aren't going to make a big dent. You could hire a service to pitch your music to actual real playlists that have real listeners, but unfortunately they're all passive listeners. So while your stream count goes up, your follower or your actual fan count sort of just stays at a plateau. You could then pay a bot farm or a bunch of people with a bunch of phones and a bunch of Spotify accounts to listen to your music, even though it's not real engagement. And a lot of people were doing it. Lots of labels were doing it. Lots of indie artists were doing it. And when it became obvious that you could inflate your stream counts that easily, well, of course there needs to be a crackdown, right? And there was. Unfortunately, the crackdown disproportionately punished independent musicians, who up until this point had really been kind of the lifeblood of Spotify's bargaining power. Because at first, the big labels, they don't love this new streaming model, right? But if Spotify can show that they can have a thriving ecosystem that is based and fueled almost entirely by independent music, and although listeners, yeah, they need to have the major label catalog in order to show up to the party, they're happy to stick around at the party because of all this other good music that they're finding. Spotify got to use us and this opportunity for discovery and our obsession with them as a platform against us in a way, because they used it to prove to the labels that the label catalogs were not quite as important as the labels imagined. So Spotify can negotiate more favorable terms with those labels. Once they have, they're happy, the labels are happy enough, and then they can start closing doors on the indies. A few doors here, a few doors there, slow at first. But when the hammer really dropped in this crackdown against artificial streaming, well, the writing was kind of on the wall. First, of course, they decided that for any track with less than 1,000 streams per year, they don't have to pay you anything. Then, if you get caught with any artificial streams, whether you generated them or not, whether you paid anyone or not, you're going to get punished. Now, let me say that again. Your song could end up on a botted playlist, whether you wanted it there or not, whether you put it there or not, whether you paid someone else to put it there or not. And when these bot farms or these fraudsters or these evil actors are trying to inflate streams for someone else, they need other innocent music in the mix, right? To kind of make it all a wash and make it not so obvious a scam. So they pull other people's music in, and you might be the victim of that. And if you get caught, you get punished. Your distributor will be fined $10, which may be more than you've ever earned in Spotify royalties for that track, in which case the distributor might say, hey, you're costing us money at this point. You're more trouble than you're worth. We're going to yank your music. Now, there's a lot of discussion and hearsay about who's actually yanking the music. Is it Spotify doing it? Is it the distributor? The same problem exists for the artist either way, no matter who's responsible. Your music gets yanked, the distributor blames Spotify. Spotify can blame the distributors. And who's really to blame may be interesting for the industry, but it doesn't really help you, the artist, if you're stuck in that moment realizing that your music has been removed from the most important music platform in the world. All because potentially someone else was doing the wrong thing. Now, why am I bringing this up if the distributors really aren't to blame, if this is truly a Spotify issue? Because you can't get a hold of anyone to get answers or to fix it. When you write your distributor's chatbot or their ticketing system, or by some miracle get someone on the phone, or finding their reps and DMing them on their personal Instagram, true story, happens to me all the time, well, it's very difficult to get a response, let alone a sufficient answer, let alone a solution. And why would your distributor help? You've cost them money. They got fined $10. You didn't generate $10. See ya. Now, in a way, to add insult to injury, it's also true in a lot of cases that people who've had their music removed can just re-upload it. Now, that's great for them. They can use the same distributor in some cases, sign it up as a separate new submission, and it goes back up. Or if that distributor is kind of staying consistent, if they're being strict, you could go to another place and upload it there, and it'll go back on Spotify. Now, that's great for you, right? Your music's back up there, out in the world, people can listen to it. But if they're trying to make an example of you in this crackdown, if their punishment of you was sound and reasoned and fair in the first place, why not enforce it all the way through? Why are they letting your music go back up there? Which just kind of makes me suspect that this whole thing is bullshit. If they, either Spotify or the distributors, wanted to do something more than just a performative solution to their problems, which of course becomes your problem, well, they'd enforce it into the future. But it's easier to do this quick thing at your expense, easier to do that than it would be to dig in and do the hard work of making a systemic, industry-wide solution that is consistent and fairly applied, whether you are self-releasing music or you are the biggest megastar in the world. So they do the expedient thing at your expense. And guess what? There's no appeals process. There's no industry-wide appeals process. There's no Spotify appeals process. So you are left trying to communicate with your individual distributor. And again, we've already established that the state of customer support, of artist support in this industry is abysmal. Well, what's going to solve any of this? I have a few thoughts, and I alluded to one of them already, in that I think that we've had a 15-year trend of a race to the bottom in terms of price. Some companies have responded to that race to the bottom by having to gut their support teams to try to automate everything, to make everything as scalable and efficient as possible. And I think a natural thing that might happen now is a pendulum swinging back to more human, one-on-one communication, more of a curatorial stance over your catalog as a distributor, which means more selectivity, and the distributors finding a way without acting like a label where they can take more of an ownership stance. I don't mean a legal rights-based ownership. I mean that they feel a sense of investment in your career to the degree that they are motivated, maybe economically or otherwise, to do the best for you, to protect your profile, to defend your music if it gets these bot streaming challenges, if there are false content ID flags, if your music isn't on Instagram or the wrong thing goes on TikTok, whatever the problem is, that they know it's in their best interest and in their brand's best interest to deal with it. Now that's of course asking the industry to change itself. But I think that music distributors by and large are facing so many problems right now. And there's such a just like devastating erosion of trust in the whole service and the whole idea of music distribution to begin with, that I think they're going to have to address some of these things, not necessarily with tech solutions, but with the most like fundamental requirement for any solution, which is just caring. So if we're just talking about capitalism and supply demand, you know, companies can all race to the bottom for price and try to deliver their service more efficiently, more cheaply. That's one way to try to stay in business. The other would, of course, been to keep your kind of Cadillac prestige pricing, make that your differentiator, and make it so obvious that the proof is always there that it's worth paying for if you're the type of person who wants that kind of service. Unfortunately, lots of distributors didn't choose to double down or triple down on the humanity. They promised the humanity and the reachability while actually trying to scale or outsource or cut their support. Another thing that happened simultaneously is that many distributors were getting gobbled up by private equity, by other distributors, or in lots of cases by big labels. And why would that happen? Why would big labels be interested in owning a bunch of indie aggregators? It's so they can treat them like a big farm team. The bigger the catalog that they control, or they have immediate access to the data, well, that helps their A&R efforts, right? Who are they going to graduate up to the big leagues? Who are they going to sign? Who are they going to swoop in and say, hey, we can't sign you yet, but like, here's a carrot we're going to dangle. We'll provide a few more bells and whistles. Let's ignore for a second that a lot of those bells and whistles are just smoke and mirrors. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these companies that used to be by artists for artists actually got bought and controlled by companies for companies. And these bigger companies deal in the world of prestige catalog. They don't give a shit about the everyman or the everywoman putting out a song that's only ever going to get 100 streams. Because the old model of music distribution, and I don't mean this as an insult, it was more like McDonald's. You make a burger, you make some fries, you sell it to everyone, right? It's volume. You're selling widgets. Big companies in the music industry think in the exact opposite way. They want prestige catalog. They want to find and monetize and claim the clout on behalf of a handful of pop stars, rock stars, jazz legends, whatever it might be, which keeps their eyes on that and off of the actual nuts and bolts of the successful business they bought, which was indie music distribution. They neglect, they disrespect, they ignore, they devalue the importance of the work that that business that they now own did for their clients. Oh, and by the way, now that they own you, they want to see maximum profitability too. That means adding value? No. Updating old systems? No. Just doing the same old thing like it always worked before? No. Cutting support, charging more and delivering less, and claiming credit for shit that they don't deserve a fucking ounce of praise for. Let me make this clear to every single person who is in charge of any strategic decision for indie music distributors. The artists that you're so proud to have on your roster, if you want to claim responsibility for an ounce of their success, they did it. They did it. The artist did it. The artist manager did it. Whatever, their team. The artist's success is their own. I could count on 0 hands the number of times I've seen a distributor make an actual difference for an artist where that artist couldn't have gotten the same result or better by just going to a different distributor. Because the sad fact is, no one's taking chances on anything anymore. When a distributor has an opportunity weekly or monthly or whatever it might be to pitch new music for additional support or for editorial placements or whatever it might be, at a DSP, a music platform out there in the world, there's only so many slots on the spreadsheet, right? They need to make sure that it's the stuff that's gonna take. How do they know it's gonna take? Well, the artist is already successful. Or if they're not successful, they have so many bullet points on their resume to brag about. I'm not blaming the distributor for that. They are doing their due diligence to make sure that the music they're pitching actually gets placed. But that becomes a self-reinforcing situation where the ones who are famous are going to get the attention, or the ones who are successful are going to get the attention, or the ones who are poised to be successful are the ones who are going to get the attention. And if that's true, that artist could go to any other distributor in the world and get the same service because it's obvious. Again, I get it. I'm not even blaming you for that, distributors. But what it does mean is you need to stop acting like it was your amazing networked intervention that made all the difference for this person. You need to be humble and realize you are in the widget selling business. You are McDonald's. You sell people burgers. It's the same burger no matter what city they're in. And if you've got a jumbo deluxe burger that you only give out for free once a year to your best-selling artist, well, guess what? Your competitor probably has that same burger to give that same artist. Don't take credit that isn't yours on behalf of prestige artists and the handful of very successful musicians when at the same time you will insult and ignore every other client you have when you have hundreds of thousands or even millions of those clients who are reaching out to me sometimes to get a hold of you. They are desperate, so they try everything they can. They go through back channels. They write to people they know no longer work at these companies, and they're like, hey, do you still have any friends at that place you used to work? And this isn't just me. This happens to every friend I have who has worked at all kinds of distributors. There's just this desperate influx of communications, DMs and texts and phone calls being like, dude, I know you don't work there anymore, but can you do anything? Do you know any people there that you can get a hold of? And I shit you not, the support teams at these companies are so overwhelmed that I have heard more than once about more than one of these companies that the way to get escalated attention, meaning like a manager or someone who can actually solve the problem will step in and call you back or finally respond to your email or just take that bare minimum of proactive, empathetic interest in your problem. In order to get that kind of attention, it has been recommended off the record through these back channels that this artist who is pissed take the time to create social content on their priority platform, be it Instagram or YouTube, complaining about the service of this particular company. And as stupid and unbelievable as this sounds, it's happening at more than one distributor. When I first heard that, I was speechless. I thought to myself, you're committing a kind of corporate suicide. Think about this. Instead of you just taking the time to solve it or passing the problem on to the person on your team who can solve it, you're asking an artist who you've already taken their money to spend more of their time to create content compelling enough to attract the attention of other artists, maybe other frustrated artists, so that you will further erode your brand reputation. You will educate people who aren't even paying attention to these issues that you are untrustworthy and no one should ever give you a dime. You're inviting hate. You're inviting more comments. And the better this content does, the worse your problem's going to get. And you're asking them to do that on purpose at the expense of their own time, instead of just calling them back. What the fuck is wrong with you? Are you serious? Who is making decisions? And how is this problem so bad that it's happening at multiple distributors? It's like an entire company never got a lesson in marketing or social media or fucking like keep your word 101. Or like when the guy who grows the grain keeps taking your money but never gives you grain, you throw him out of the goddamn village. Oh, I'm sorry, you actually wanted the grain you paid for? Yes, we need you to go down to the town square, grab the giant bullhorn, and please write a really fantastic poem that skewers us and is full of all kind of profanities. Oh, and by the way, get the king to sign it too. Get him to consent to your insults of us, and then we'll maybe think about giving you the grain you paid for. Stupid, counterproductive corporate suicide. And worst of all, it is a further insult to your artists. All right, so what are we going to do about any of this? First, plan for a future of more gatekeeping. As I said, as the industry kind of fractures a bit and there's more and more players in the space, they're likely going to attract trust and clients because they're going to provide better service. They need to find a way, without being a label and claiming actual ownership, to take a long-term sense of pride and ownership in how well you do under their watch. As they provide better service to a smaller amount of clients, two things might happen. One, as I said earlier, is that the criteria to earn distribution becomes harder. You have to prove yourself. You have to jump through more hurdles. You have to achieve more before you have proved yourself deserving of this service. The other could be that they just charge a lot more for it, or some combination of the two. But there's a deeper concern that I have here that I think you should plan for, and that is, to state the obvious, that we're living through a time of exponential, accelerating music creation. Depending on how you look at it, it was either wonderful or bad enough already as music creation technology got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and more people around the world got interested in making music that way, which cut down the barrier to entry, which is a great thing. It also comes with trade-offs. Catalog management, rights issues, fraud, all these things, as we've mentioned, get harder and harder. And a service like Distrokid was already dealing with that. It was bad enough when it was driven mostly by humans. But now we have Skynet, or The Matrix, or Suno to help us out. And if music creation goes like this to that, what is music distribution going to even mean? Because I don't care if you have 20 or 2,000 of these music distribution companies. You can't handle that volume, and no one is interested in that volume. Human attention doesn't work like that. And the future of the industry I'm kind of predicting and worried about is one in which the hurdle to distribution at all is really, really high. A wall goes up, a barrier goes up between you and the endpoint, between you and your listener. And to get over it, you have to do better, be more popular, have more streams, earn more revenue, play more gigs, whatever it is. I think in this future, you're going to have to prove yourself before you get distributed. It may look one way for artists who've already put out music. They've got their reputation going. They have some metrics to show for it. So they can keep putting out music, maybe. But for the brand new artist, for the person putting out music for the first time, it's not going to look the way it looked between, let's say, 2005 and 2025. And if that future sounds a little far-fetched, think about it this way. The reliance Spotify had on independent music is a thing of the past. In a world of infinite music, we might lean all the more on the most valuable IP, the major label catalogs. One of the distributors that was a competitor of CD Baby, and I've not mentioned their name in this video at all, so it's no one I've talked about yet. We got some intel that what they called their clients behind their clients' back was trash pandas, because that company had been grappling with the reality, and they resented the reality that a lot of their clients were making crappy music. Pair that with statements from Lucien Grange, the guy who runs one of the biggest labels in the world, where he says that independent music aggregators are merchants of garbage. And that presumably includes one of the very companies he is in the midst of trying to purchase. If your new owner or your prospective owner says your business model is something I just downright don't respect, what do you expect to happen in the future when you get bought? Like what is the future of an industry that the power players, when they soak up all these companies, say, we hate this. We're buying things we hate. What are they going to do with it? Maybe they're purchasing it for that sort of farm team capability. Maybe they're going to flip off the switch that enables anyone to distribute anything in favor of a world with much fewer songs. Doesn't that sound like the obvious way to combat a world where AI can help us create infinite amounts of songs, like endlessly? I would think sort of psychologically, just to lean into a sane solution, you would go back to a very gate-kept, very curated, small amount of catalog. And if you're still suspicious and you say, well, we've moved past that world where the internet has blown everything open, we just want endless all the time. Not true, because look at what Spotify did. They used independent music to be in a somewhat stronger negotiating position with labels. And once those deals were inked, well, favoritism goes to the labels because, let's admit it, those catalogs contained the most in-demand music in the world. So plan for that future where you accept that your music might not be able to reach the masses on a platform like YouTube or Spotify or wherever else unless you've done the necessary good work of building an audience and attention already. Now, the good news is you want to be doing that anyways, right? I mean, you presumably are trying to build your audience in the right way and find real fans, not bot streams, good playlists, not shit playlists, actual customers, actual email subscribers, not just empty views of a random video that went viral. The nuts and bolts of a music career where you have a direct relationship with your audience. It's what we want to be and what you should be doing anyways. If you're doing it well, you won't have much to worry about because you'll have all those bullet points on your resume. You'll have all the trophies you need to get that sort of bare minimum of acceptance so that your application for music distribution in a world where music distribution is harder to get will be a no-brainer. I also want to encourage you to adopt a mindset of, I don't know what to call it exactly. It'd be like, pretend it's 2004 all over again. By which I mean, when I started at CD Baby, it was a pre-iTunes era. The company had been featured in Wired magazine and was, sort of this tech darling in a way, but what we were doing was a very analog physical service. We were enabling musicians to sell their CDs, their physical CDs, to warehouse them with us, and then to direct their fans, either at shows or through their email lists or on their website, to CD Baby to buy it. As simple as that sounds now, it's essentially kind of like Shopify with the order fulfillment baked in. It was revolutionary at the time. We helped them process credit card transactions, and whenever they had a sale, we would give them the contact information for the customer. We simplified some of the things that had previously been difficult about having a direct-to-fan relationship with your audience. But I feel like it was this really glorious time of independent music possibility, and the artists we saw succeeding, it was post-90s major label CD sales dominance. So the music was indie, quirky, anti-folk, nerd rap, strange metal. It was suddenly a reality for niche artists to have pretty broad audiences thanks to the internet, and then to sell them stuff. Not get them to stream for fractions of a penny, but to engage in actual commerce. And for anyone who was paying attention at that time, I'll also remind you, this was a time before social media. MySpace had just launched, but the bulk of that relationship between the artist and their audience was being managed face-to-face at venues through their own websites that they were hosting and their email list. The good news is that all three of those things are still extremely powerful and extremely personal. If you're an artist who performs live, I think leaning into all three of those things was smart then, and it's smart now. More important than social media attention, more important than your Spotify streams, more important even than your YouTube views. And so to the degree that you can say, hey, I don't live in the world of social media and quick attention, I live in 2004. I want to find fans that I impress face-to-face. I want to know them. I want to get their contact information. I want to use the email to sell them things. I want to use my email to get them to my website. These are fundamentals of marketing, fundamentals of storytelling, and the fundamentals of you having a relationship with a fan base that isn't at the mercy of streaming and social algorithms. And similar to my last point, when you do all that, if it's going well, those will be the exact gestures and the exact infrastructure you need to achieve all the medals and the trophies and the accolades and the metrics that will open the door to distribution in a world where distribution becomes scarce again. So pretend it's 2004, but if you're also living in the present day, well, of course you want your music in all the places, in which case I will advise you, because you now know every distributor sucks, they all screw stuff up, all of their support is terrible, you're gonna need longer lead times. Can't just upload a track and expect it to be out next week with no issues. Start months in advance if you can. Hopefully in that longer lead time, you can also tighten up your metadata. Make sure everything is spelled correctly. Make sure everything is correct. You have the right songwriters, the right publishers, that your features are correct. Every little bit of data you need to provide them is complete and accurate. And here's the part where I'm going to give you some advice that is a little bit different to what Jesse Cannon said in his video, where he recommended 3 specific distributors with the best, or probably like the least shitty service. My advice, as I said, is a little more contingency related, a little more alarmist, a little more paranoid, and probably people in the music industry would tell you it's overkill. People in music distribution would tell you I'm crazy, that you'd never need to do what I'm about to tell you to do. But here it is. Have a backup distributor for every release. I'm serious. When you're getting ready to release new music and you sign it up with a distributor, once you've uploaded it, once you've put the artwork in, you've put in the metadata, you feel like it's ready to go somewhere else and do the exact same thing. Now, of course, that means some distributors aren't going to work for you because they make you pay upfront just to have this kind of annual subscription thing. So I am suggesting find the handful of distributors that are still out there that allow you to upload your music, your artwork, provide the metadata before paying. There are still a few out there that will let you do that. Some are subscription-based, some are per release based, but either way, sign it up twice. Don't pay the backup distributor. Just wait. And if you're, part of the whatever, 70 or 80 or 90% of artists out there who have their release go off without a hitch, that's fantastic. That's what this company should be doing in the first place. And you can look to me and say, Chris, you wasted my time. Why'd you make me paranoid? But I can say that if the state of music distribution stays the way it is today for years to come, then it's not going to be if, but it'll be when they screw up your release. Could be human error. Could be your fault. Could be their fault. Could be a fraudster. Could be an AI asshole. The more music you release, the more chances you are going to have for them to mess up and to not be reachable when they do. So, backup distributor. Be paranoid. If you're like a lot of artists and your music is stuck in some queue, it's not been inspected, it's been flagged for some concern, you can't get a hold of anyone, your release date is staring at you in the face, is a week away, 6 days away, 5 days away, 4 days away, and still no one has gotten back to you, go to the other distributor. Make sure that whatever problem happened with the first distributor is addressed before you pay, before you finalize, then pay them, then get it out there. 9 times out of 10, this contingency plan will be overkill. That 10th time, you'll be so thankful that you're like the musical equivalent of a doomsday prepper. And lastly, in order for anything to change, the right people, the people who can do anything about it, have to know that you're pissed, right? And so that could be politicians, it could be music rights, advocacy agencies, but really, why not just start with the distributors? Voice your displeasure. In the Venus Theory video I mentioned earlier, he actually says towards the end, send this video to the distributor that you're pissed at. So I'll say something similar. You could send this one if you think his is more entertaining and articulate, you could send his. Doesn't matter to me. As I said, there's a Jesse Cannon video. Send them some record that suggests it's not just you who are complaining, but this is a growing problem where artists at large are just not trusting music distribution. And the less and less we trust it, the less we'll turn to it, the less important it will become, the less we'll use it. We will deprioritize getting our music out to algorithmically driven platforms that don't reward us much anyways. We will prioritize living in 2004, where we will have direct relationships with our fans and our customers. And if we do that, then what the fuck do we need you for? Get your shit together if you want to have customers at all. When you have customers, treat them with respect, not only because they paid you, but also because they're human. When it comes to music and catalog management and fraud and rights issues, humans today are going to be the least of your problems and the heart of all your solutions. Whew. All right, I got that off my chest. I hope it was cathartic. Maybe it was cathartic for me and I've just passed off my stress onto you and you're like, Jesus, man, I didn't know any of that. Now I'm fucking stressed. If so, my slight apologies, but mostly I hope you've taken away that you should be doing the things I recommended towards the end. Prepare yourself and your music for a future where music distribution is harder to acquire, but also for the one where you need them less and less. Which reminds me to tell you again, if you are preparing your own music for distribution, you want to get it out there and have as few hassles as possible, check out my guide. It's called The Music Distribution Checklist That Your Distributor Hopes You'll Never Read. It's free. I'll put the link in the show notes. And with that out of the way, I'll see you next week for a much happier episode. See you then.